I worked as a retail worker at a small store in the heart of the city. It was a mundane job, but I enjoyed the routine and the interactions with customers. However, there was one customer who caught my attention in a way that made me uncomfortable. He was a tall, middle-aged man who seemed to always be there whenever I was working. At first, I brushed it off as a coincidence, but as time went on, I began to notice that he was always watching me with an unnerving intensity. His gaze made me feel uneasy, like he was studying me, trying to figure me out. I tried to ignore him and focus on my work, but his presence lingered in the back of my mind like a dark shadow. Then, things took a turn for the worse when I started finding disturbing notes left behind in the store. They were written in a scrawled handwriting, filled with cryptic messages that hinted at a dangerous obsession. The notes were vague, but they made it clear that whoever was leaving them had been watching me for a long time, studying my every move. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was being stalked by someone who seemed to know everything about me. I tried to brush off the notes as a prank, but deep down, I knew that they were anything but harmless. The words seemed to taunt me, filling me with a sense of dread that I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. As the days passed, the notes became more frequent, appearing in the most unexpected places: a stack of clothes, a shelf, even tucked inside my locker. Each time I found one, my heart skipped a beat, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. I began to feel like I was constantly being watched, like there were eyes on me at all times, lurking in the shadows just out of sight. The thought sent shivers down my spine, filling me with a sense of paranoia that I couldn't shake. I tried to confide in my coworkers about what was happening, but they brushed off my concerns, chalking it up to my imagination running wild. They didn't understand the fear that consumed me, the sense of being trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the man who had been watching me for so long finally approached me. He cornered me in the store one evening, his eyes burning with a dangerous intensity as he spoke. He claimed that he had been watching me for months, studying my every move, and that he was deeply in love with me. My blood ran cold as I listened to his words, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I tried to brush him off, to tell him that I wasn't interested, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He grew more and more aggressive, his words turning into threats as he backed me into a corner. I was terrified, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that I was alone with a man who seemed intent on doing me harm. I searched desperately for a way out, but the store was empty, and there was nowhere to run. Just when I thought that all hope was lost, a coworker walked in and intervened, pulling the man away from me and calling the police. They arrived quickly and took him into custody, but the fear and trauma of that night lingered long after he was gone. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that his obsession with me had not ended with his arrest. I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder and wondering if he would come back to finish what he started. But despite the terror that consumed me, I refused to let it control my life. I returned to work, determined to move past the nightmare that had haunted me for so long. I was just an ordinary guy working the night shift at a 24-hour convenience store in a rough neighborhood. It wasn't the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills and kept me busy during the quiet hours of the night. Little did I know, my shift was about to take a terrifying turn. As the night progressed, I noticed a group of shady characters loitering outside the store. They wore masks to hide their faces, and their body language screamed trouble. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I realized that they were eyeing the store with ill intent. I tried to focus on my work, stocking shelves and ringing up customers, but the sense of unease lingered in the back of my mind like a dark cloud. Every time I glanced out the window, I saw the group of masked figures lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting. As the hours ticked by, the store grew quieter, and the streets outside grew deserted. It was just me and the robbers now, locked in a tense standoff as the night stretched on endlessly. Then, without warning, the group burst through the door, their faces obscured by masks as they brandished weapons and demanded money. My heart raced as I realized that I was facing an armed robbery, with no way to defend myself. I tried to remain calm as I complied with their demands, handing over the cash from the register and doing my best to keep the situation from escalating. But the robbers were relentless, their eyes filled with greed and violence as they ransacked the store for anything of value. I felt a surge of fear coursing through my veins as I watched them tear through the aisles, destroying everything in their path in their quest for money and power. I knew that I was powerless to stop them, that all I could do was wait and hope for help to arrive. But as the minutes turned into hours, help seemed like a distant dream, a flicker of hope in the darkness of the night. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare of my own making, with no way out and no one to turn to for help. The robbers grew more aggressive as the night wore on, their demands turning into threats as they searched for anything of value to steal. I tried to reason with them, to plead for mercy, but they were beyond reason, consumed by their own greed and desperation. I felt a sense of despair washing over me as I realized that I was at the mercy of these ruthless criminals, with no way to escape the horror unfolding around me. I closed my eyes and prayed for it to end, for someone to come and rescue me from this living nightmare. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. Relief washed over me as I realized that help was finally on the way, that I would soon be free from the clutches of the robbers who had terrorized me for so long. The police arrived quickly and apprehended the robbers, taking them into custody and restoring order to the chaos that had engulfed the store. I breathed a sigh of relief as I watched them being led away in handcuffs, knowing that justice would be served for their crimes. I was just a regular guy working at a hardware store, helping customers find the tools and materials they needed for their projects. It was a job like any other, until one day, things took a terrifying turn. It started with a simple complaint from a customer who claimed that a product they had purchased was faulty. I tried to help them as best I could, offering a refund or replacement, but they weren't satisfied. They demanded compensation for their inconvenience, growing more agitated with each passing moment. I did my best to defuse the situation, but the customer's anger only seemed to escalate. They started making threats, telling me that they would make me pay for the trouble they had endured because of the faulty product. At first, I brushed off their threats as empty words, but then the phone call started. They would call the store multiple times a day, leaving angry messages and hurling insults at me over the phone. I tried to ignore them, to focus on my work and not let their words get to me, but it was hard not to feel afraid. As the days went by, the threats grew more and more sinister. The customer claimed that they knew where I lived, that they would come after me and make me pay for what they perceived as my negligence. I tried to brush it off as idle threats, but deep down, I knew that they were serious. I started to feel like I was being watched, like someone was always lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I couldn't sleep at night, my mind consumed with fear and paranoia over what the customer might do next. Then, one day, I received a package in the mail. It was addressed to me, with no return address or sender's name. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, my heart pounding in my chest as I wondered what could be inside. When I finally mustered up the courage to open the package, I found a note inside, written in shaky handwriting. It was from the customer, and it was filled with more threats and warnings, telling me to watch my back because they were coming for me. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the note, my hands trembling with fear. I knew that I had to do something, that I couldn't just sit back and wait for the customer to make good on their threats. I went to the police and filed a report, but there was little they could do without concrete evidence of a crime. They offered to assign a patrol car to keep an eye on my house, but I knew that wouldn't be enough to protect me from someone who was determined to do me harm. I started carrying pepper spray with me wherever I went, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at the slightest sound. I couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted, of being trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Then, one night, as I was closing up the store, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around to see the customer standing there, their eyes filled with malice as they lunged at me with a knife. I barely had time to react, but instinct kicked in and I managed to dodge out of the way just in time. I ran as fast as I could, the customer out on my heels as we raced through the empty streets. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from the customer before it was too late. I ducked into alleyways and side streets, doing my best to lose them in the darkness of the night. But no matter how hard I tried, the customer was always right behind me, their footsteps echoing in my ears like a death knell. I felt like a cornered animal, with nowhere left to run and no one left to turn to for help. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I stumbled upon a police patrol car parked at the end of the street. I ran towards it, shouting for help as the customer closed in on me from behind. The police sprang into action, apprehending the customer before they could do me any harm. I collapsed to the ground, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. I worked the night shift at a gas station in a remote area. It's usually quiet, but tonight feels different. There's a sense of unease in the air, like something is lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. As I stand behind the counter, idly flipping through a magazine to pass the time, I hear the door chime jingle, signaling the arrival of a customer. I look up and see a man standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with fear. He rushes inside, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he looks around frantically. "Please, you have to help me," he pleads, his voice trembling with desperation. I'm taken aback by his urgency, but I try to remain calm as I ask him what's wrong. He tells me that he's being chased by something in the darkness outside, something he can't explain. I glance out the window, but all I can see is the empty darkness stretching out into the night. There's no sign of anyone or anything out there, but the man's fear is contagious, and I can't help but feel a sense of unease creeping over me. I try to reassure him that he's safe here, that whatever he's running from won't be able to get inside. But he refuses to listen, his eyes darting around the store as if he's expecting something to burst through the door at any moment. As we talk, I notice that he keeps glancing nervously over his shoulder, as if he's expecting someone or something to come crashing through the door at any moment. I can tell that he's genuinely terrified, and it sends a chill down my spine. I offer to call the police, but he shakes his head, insisting that they won't be able to help him. He tells me that whatever is out there is unlike anything he's ever seen before, something that defies explanation. I don't know what to make of his story, but I can see the fear in his eyes, and I know that I can't just leave him here alone. So, against my better judgment, I offer to let him stay inside until whatever he's running from goes away. He nods gratefully, his shoulders slumping with relief as he sinks into one of the chairs by the window. I try to make small talk to distract him from whatever is happening outside, but it's clear that his mind is elsewhere. As the minutes tick by, the tension in the air grows thicker, like a tangible presence pressing down on us from all sides. I find myself glancing nervously out the window, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness, but there's nothing there. Suddenly, the man jumps to his feet, his eyes wide with fear as he stares out into the darkness. "It's here," he whispers, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I follow his gaze and see a shadowy figure emerging from the darkness, its movements slow and deliberate as it approaches the store. My blood runs cold as I realize that whatever this thing is, it's not human. Without thinking, I rush to lock the door, my hands trembling with fear as I struggle to find the key. But before I can do anything, the figure reaches the door and throws it open with a strength that sends me stumbling backwards. I scream as it steps inside, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light as it fixes its gaze on the man standing in front of me. I can see the fear in his eyes, but he stands his ground, his jaw set in determination as he faces down whatever is coming for him. And then, just when it seems like all hope is lost, I hear the sound of sirens approaching in the distance. Relief floods through me as I realize that help is on the way, that we might just make it out of this alive after all. The figure hesitates for a moment, as if sensing that its time is running out. And then, with a final, guttural growl, it turns and disappears into the darkness, leaving us alone once more. The police arrive a few moments later, their flashing lights illuminating the darkness as they rush to our aid. They take statements from both of us, but I can tell that they're skeptical of our story. Still, they promise to investigate, and I can only hope that they'll be able to uncover the truth behind whatever it was that came after us tonight. As the adrenaline fades and the reality of what just happened sinks in, I find myself shaking with fear and exhaustion. But through it all, I'm grateful that we made it out alive, that we were able to get help in time to fend off whatever was hunting us. I work at a jewelry store in the heart of the city, and lately, things have been getting weird. It all started a few weeks ago when I found a small bouquet of roses sitting on the counter when I arrived for my shift. There was no note, no indication of who they were from, but I couldn't help feeling flattered. At first, I thought it was just a random act of kindness from a secret admirer, but then the gifts started getting more extravagant. A box of chocolates, a bottle of expensive perfume, even a diamond necklace, all delivered anonymously to the store, with no explanation. At first, I was thrilled by the attention, but as the gifts continued to pour in, I started to feel uneasy. It was like someone was watching me, studying my every move from the shadows. I tried to brush off my fears, to convince myself that it was just a harmless crush, but then things took a darker turn. One day, I found a single red rose waiting for me in my car, nestled on the driver's seat like a sinister omen. I tried to tell myself that it was just a coincidence, that someone must have left it there by mistake, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Someone was stalking me, watching my every move, and I didn't know why. I started to feel paranoid, like I was constantly being watched, even when I was alone. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every noise sending shivers down my spine. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received a package in the mail, a small, velvet box containing a sparkling diamond ring. There was no note, no explanation, just the ring sitting there in its box, taunting me with its silent accusation. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized that whoever was sending me these gifts wasn't just a secret admirer, they were dangerous. They knew where I lived, where I worked, and they weren't afraid to invade my life in the most intimate of ways. I tried to tell the police, but without any evidence or concrete threats, there was little they could do. They promised to keep an eye on things, but I could tell that they didn't take me seriously. I felt helpless, like a mouse being toyed with by a cat, and I didn't know what to do. Every time I stepped outside, I felt like I was being watched, like someone was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I started taking different routes home from work, looking over my shoulder every few seconds, but it didn't matter. No matter where I went or what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that followed me like a dark cloud. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received a chilling message on my phone, a photo of me, taken from a distance, with the words "I'm always watching" written underneath. I felt my blood run cold as I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with fear and uncertainty. Whoever was behind this wasn't just a harmless admirer, they were a predator, stalking their prey with deadly intent. I knew that I needed to take action to protect myself before it was too late. So, with a newfound sense of determination, I decided to confront my stalker head-on. I set up a meeting with them, pretending to be interested in their gifts, hoping to catch them off guard and unmask their true identity. It was a risky move, but I knew that I had to do something before they struck again. As I waited for them to arrive, my heart pounded in my chest, and my palms grew sweaty with nerves. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that I had to be ready for anything. And then, just when I was about to give up hope, they walked through the door a man, tall and imposing, with a sinister glint in his eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that my stalker was someone I knew, someone I trusted. I confronted him, demanding to know why he had been sending me gifts, why he had been stalking me like some kind of twisted predator. But instead of answering, he just laughed, a cold, heartless sound that sent shivers down my spine. And then, without warning, he lunged at me, his hands closing around my throat with a strength that took my breath away. I struggled against him, fighting for my life as he tried to choke the life out of me. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I glanced up and saw a group of people rushing towards us, their faces determined and their expressions grim. They pulled him off of me, dragging him away, kicking and screaming as I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I realized that I was safe, that help had finally arrived. I worked the night shift at a diner on the outskirts of town. It's usually pretty quiet around here at this time of night, but tonight feels different. There's a tension in the air, a sense of unease that I can't quite shake. As I wipe down the counter, I notice a group of men walk in. They're rough looking, with tattoos covering their arms and a menacing glint in their eyes. I try to ignore them and focus on my work, but something about them makes my skin crawl. They take a seat at one of the booths in the corner, whispering amongst themselves and casting furtive glances in my direction. I can feel their eyes on me, watching me with an intensity that sends a shiver down my spine. I try to push down my fear and carry on with my duties, but the feeling of unease only grows stronger with each passing moment. It's like they're waiting for something, biding their time until the moment is right. I try to keep my distance from them, avoiding eye contact and staying busy behind the counter. But no matter how hard I try to ignore them, I can't shake the feeling that they're watching my every move, studying me like a predator stalking its prey. As the night wears on, the diner empties out, leaving me alone with the group of men. I can feel the tension in the air thickening, suffocating me with its oppressive weight. I try to focus on my work, to block out the feeling of fear that gnaws at the pit of my stomach. But then, one of the men gets up from his seat and starts walking towards me, his footsteps echoing loudly in the empty diner. I freeze, my heart pounding in my chest as he approaches me with a menacing grin on his face. He leans in close, his breath hot against my ear as he whispers something that sends chills down my spine. I try to back away, to put some distance between us, but he grabs hold of my arm with a vice-like grip, holding me in place as he continues to whisper threats and insults in my ear. I can feel the panic rising inside me, threatening to overwhelm me with its suffocating intensity. I know that I need to get away from him, to escape from this nightmare before it's too late. With a surge of adrenaline, I wrench myself free from his grasp and bolt towards the door, ignoring his shouts and curses as I run for my life. I can hear his footsteps behind me, chasing me down like a predator on the hunt. I reach the door and fling it open, stumbling out into the darkness of the night. I can hear the sound of footsteps behind me, getting closer and closer with each passing moment. I don't stop running until I reach the safety of my car, my heart pounding in my chest and my breath coming in ragged gasps. I glance back towards the diner and see the group of men standing in the doorway, watching me with cold, emotionless eyes. I start the car and peel out of the parking lot, my hands shaking on the wheel as I speed away into the night. I don't stop until I reach the safety of my own home, where I collapse into a trembling heap on the floor. I don't know what those men wanted from me, and I'm not sure I want to find out. All I know is that I never want to set foot in that diner again, not after what happened tonight. I work at an electronics store, just your average job, nothing too exciting. Most days, it's the same routine, helping customers find what they need, restocking shelves, and ringing up purchases at the register. But one night, things took a turn for the worse. It was late, and I was getting ready to close up shop for the night when a man walked in. He seemed normal enough at first, just another customer with a problem he needed help with. He said his DVD player wasn't working and that he needed a replacement. I tried to assist him as best I could, asking him some questions to try to figure out what might be wrong with his DVD player. But as I spoke to him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about him. There was a darkness in his eyes, a coldness that sent a chill down my spine. I tried to ignore it and focus on helping him, but the feeling only grew stronger with each passing moment. As I showed him some replacement options, he grew increasingly agitated, his voice rising with frustration as he insisted that none of them would do. He seemed fixated on finding the exact model of DVD player that he had before, even though it was an older model that we no longer stocked. I tried to reason with him, to explain that we didn't have the model he was looking for and that perhaps he should consider getting a newer, better one instead. But he wouldn't listen, his eyes flashing with anger as he demanded that I find him the DVD player he wanted. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, suffocating me with its oppressive weight. I knew that I needed to defuse the situation before it escalated any further, but I wasn't sure how. Just as I was about to suggest that he come back during regular business hours when we might have more options available, he suddenly lunged towards me, his hands reaching out to grab hold of me. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to put some distance between us. But he was relentless, his grip like a vice as he pulled me towards him with a strength that seemed unnatural. I screamed for help, but there was no one else around to hear me. It was just me and him, alone in the darkened store with no one to come to my rescue. I struggled against him, trying to break free from his grasp, but he was too strong. His hands were like iron, holding me in place as he whispered threats and insults in my ear. I could feel the panic rising inside me, threatening to overwhelm me with its suffocating intensity. I knew that I needed to get away from him, to escape from this nightmare before it was too late. With a surge of adrenaline, I managed to break free from his grasp and bolt towards the exit. I could hear him shouting after me, his voice filled with rage and frustration as he pursued me through the darkened aisles of the store. I reached the door and flung it open, stumbling out into the night with tears streaming down my face. I didn't stop running until I was far away from the store, far away from him and whatever twisted intentions he had. I called the police and reported what had happened, but by the time they arrived, he was long gone. They took my statement and assured me that they would do everything in their power to track him down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to strike. From that day on, I couldn't shake the feeling of fear that haunted me wherever I went. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every shadow and every sound, terrified that he would come back for me. I never returned to that electronics store again, not after what happened that night. And even now, years later, the memory of that chilling encounter still sends shivers down my spine. I work at a toll booth, which is not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays the bills. Most days, it's pretty routine. Cars come and go. I collect their tolls, and that's about it. But one night, something happened that I'll never forget. It was late, and the highway was quiet. I was just sitting there, staring out at the empty road, when a car pulled up to the booth. Inside were a man and a woman, and there was something about them that immediately set me on edge. They didn't look like your typical travelers. Their clothes were old and worn, and their faces were drawn and haggard, like they hadn't slept in days. But it wasn't just their appearance that bothered me, it was the way they looked at me, with eyes that seemed to see right through me. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that washed over me as I collected their toll and handed them their change. But as they drove away, I couldn't help but feel like something wasn't right. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of a car pulling up to the booth again. I looked up, expecting to see another car, but instead, it was the same couple from before. I felt a chill run down my spine as they stared at me with those same unnerving eyes. There was something about the way they looked at me, like they were sizing me up, that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to act normal as I collected their toll and handed them their change, but inside, I was panicking. I just wanted them to leave, to get as far away from me as possible. But they didn't leave. Instead, they just sat there, watching me with those same cold, calculating eyes. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, suffocating me with its oppressive weight. I tried to ignore them, to focus on my work and pretend like everything was fine. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the man leaned out of the window and said something to me. His voice was low and gravelly, sending a shiver down my spine as he spoke. I couldn't make out what he was saying at first, but then he repeated himself, his words sending a chill down my spine. He said they were looking for someone who had wronged them, and that they wouldn't rest until they found them. I felt my blood run cold as I realized that they were talking about me. I didn't know what they wanted or why they were after me, but I knew that I needed to get away from them as quickly as possible. I tried to act calm as I handed them their change and wished them a good night, but inside, I was shaking with fear. I just wanted them to leave, to disappear into the night and never come back. But they didn't leave. Instead, they just sat there, watching me with those same cold, dead eyes. I could feel their gaze burning into me, like they were trying to see right through me. I didn't know what to do. I felt like a trapped animal, cornered with no way out. I knew that I needed to call for help, but I was too afraid to even move. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the man reached out and grabbed hold of my arm. His grip was like iron, sending a shock of pain shooting through me as he pulled me towards him. I tried to pull away, to break free from his grasp, but he was too strong. I could feel the panic rising inside me, threatening to overwhelm me with its suffocating intensity. But then, just as I thought all hope was lost, I heard the sound of approaching headlights. I looked up to see a car pulling up to the booth, and I felt a surge of relief wash over me. I managed to break free from the man's grasp and stumble backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched the car approach. It was a police car, and as soon as the officers saw what was happening, they sprang into action. They arrested the couple and took them away, and as I watched them drive off into the night, I felt a sense of overwhelming relief wash over me. I was safe, at least for now. But as I stood there, shaking and alone in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that they would be back. That they would always be out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to strike. I work at a cafe in the airport, and most days, It's a pretty mundane job. I serve coffee and snacks to tired travelers, and that's about it. But one day, something happened that turned my world upside down. It was a slow day at the cafe, and I was wiping down tables when a man walked in. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room as if he were being followed. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming he was just another weary traveler. But then he came up to the counter and ordered a coffee, and as I handed it to him, he leaned in close and whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. He said he was on the run from the law, that he had done something terrible and needed to get out of town fast. I didn't know what to do. I felt frozen in place, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. I wanted to run, to get as far away from him as possible, but something kept me rooted to the spot. He looked at me with pleading eyes, begging me to help him, and I could see the desperation written all over his face. I didn't know if I could trust him, but something about him seemed genuine, like he really was in trouble. I tried to act calm as I listened to his story, but inside, I was panicking. I didn't know if I should believe him or if he was just trying to manipulate me into helping him. But then he showed me a newspaper article, with his face plastered across the front page. It was a story about a serious crime, one that had shocked the community and left everyone reeling. I felt my blood run cold as I read the article, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that he wasn't lying. He really was on the run from the law, and he needed my help to escape. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was caught in a nightmare, with no way out. But then I remembered something, an old friend who worked at another airport across the country. I told him about my friend and how she might be able to help him get out of town safely. He seemed relieved, grateful for any help he could get, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me knowing that I had done something to help him. But as he left the cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. I knew that I had just helped a criminal escape justice, and I couldn't help but wonder what other crimes he might commit now that he was free. I tried to push the thought out of my mind as I went about my day, but it nagged at me like a persistent itch. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake, one that would come back to haunt me in the end. And sure enough, a few days later, I heard the news, a string of robberies and violent crimes committed by the man I had helped escape. I felt sick to my stomach knowing that I had played a part in his reign of terror, that I had let my fear and uncertainty cloud my judgment. I wanted to come forward and confess my role in his escape, but I was too afraid of what would happen if I did. I felt like a prisoner in my own life, trapped by my own guilt and shame. But then, just when I thought all hope was lost, the police showed up at the cafe. They had tracked the man down to another airport across the country, and they were asking questions about anyone who might have helped him escape. I felt a surge of panic wash over me as I realized that they were onto me, that they knew I had helped him get away. I wanted to run, to disappear into the night and never look back, but I knew that I couldn't outrun my guilt. So, I did the only thing I could do. I confessed. I told the police everything, from the moment he walked into the cafe to the moment he left. I didn't know what would happen to me, but I knew that I couldn't live with the guilt of knowing what I had done. And as I sat in the police station, waiting for them to decide my fate, I couldn't help but wonder how different things might have been if I had just listened to my instincts and turned him away. But it was too late for regrets now. I work at a fast food joint, flipping burgers and taking orders at the register. It's a pretty routine job, nothing too exciting ever happens. But one night, everything changed. It was a slow night at the restaurant, and I was wiping down tables when I heard the door slam open. I turned to see a man rushing in, his eyes wide in panic. He shouted something about my car being on fire, and my heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, I dropped what I was doing and ran outside, my heart pounding in my chest. But when I got out there, I realized that my car was fine. There was no fire, no smoke, nothing. Confused, I turned back towards the restaurant, but before I could go back inside, I saw him, a man standing in the shadows, watching me with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. I froze, my heart racing as I stared back at him, unsure of what to do. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there watching me with those cold, calculating eyes. I wanted to scream, to run away as fast as I could, but something held me in place. It was like I was rooted to the spot, unable to move as the man continued to stare at me with that unnerving gaze. But then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned and ran off into the night, disappearing into the darkness like a ghost. I stood there for a moment, trying to catch my breath, before I finally turned and went back inside. I tried to push the encounter out of my mind as I finished my shift, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the man lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to let my guard down. When my shift finally ended, I hurried out to my car, my heart racing as I fumbled with the keys. I felt like I was being watched, like someone or something was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But when I finally got the car started and pulled out of the parking lot, I breathed a sigh of relief. I told myself that I was just being paranoid, that there was nothing to be afraid of. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man from the restaurant staring back at me from the darkness. When I finally got home, I locked the doors and windows tight, my heart still pounding in my chest. I tried to push the encounter out of my mind, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. I didn't sleep that night, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. I kept replaying the encounter over and over in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. The next day, I went back to work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept glancing around nervously, half expecting to see the man from the restaurant lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. But as the days turned into weeks and nothing else happened, I started to relax. Maybe it had just been a one-time thing, a random encounter with a stranger in the night. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that the man from the restaurant was still out there, somewhere, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And no matter how hard I tried to forget, I couldn't shake the feeling of fear that lingered in the back of my mind, like a shadow that refused to be banished. I work at a big supermarket, stocking shelves and helping customers find what they need. It's usually a pretty ordinary job, but lately, things have been feeling off. It all started a few weeks ago when I noticed my manager, Mr. Thompson, acting strangely around me. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, but the more I paid attention, the more I realized that something wasn't right. He would always seem to be hovering around me, watching me as I worked, his eyes following my every move. And whenever I would catch him staring, he would quickly look away, like he was trying to hide something. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe he was just making sure I was doing my job properly. But as time went on, his behavior only seemed to get worse. He started showing up at my register more often, asking me questions about my personal life and making comments that made me uncomfortable. And whenever I tried to avoid him, he would always find a way to corner me, like he was deliberately trying to make me feel trapped. I started to feel like I was being watched all the time, like Mr. Thompson was always lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And no matter how hard I tried to shake the feeling, I couldn't escape the sense of unease that settled over me like a dark cloud. Then, one day, I found something that confirmed my worst fears, a hidden camera tucked away in the corner of the break room, pointed directly at my locker. My heart raced as I realized that Mr. Thompson had been spying on me, watching my every move when I thought I was alone. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized just how much he must know about me, about my habits and routines. And the thought of him watching me, invading my privacy like that, filled me with a sense of horror and violation that I couldn't shake. I knew that I had to do something, that I couldn't just let Mr. Thompson get away with what he had done. But I also knew that confronting him would be dangerous, that he was capable of anything to protect his secrets. So, I started keeping a close eye on him, watching for any signs that he might be planning something. And sure enough, it wasn't long before I started noticing him lurking around the store after hours, long after everyone else had gone home. I knew that I had to be careful, that confronting him alone would be too risky. So, I reached out to a coworker that I trusted, someone who I knew would have my back. Together, we started gathering evidence, documenting Mr. Thompson's suspicious behavior and collecting testimony from other employees who had witnessed his misconduct. And finally, we took our case to the higher-ups, demanding that action be taken to hold Mr. Thompson accountable for his actions. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I felt like giving up. But in the end, our hard work paid off, and Mr. Thompson was fired from his position at the supermarket. But even though he was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling of fear and unease that lingered in the air. I knew that he was still out there, somewhere, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And no matter how hard I tried to move on, I couldn't escape the sense of dread that followed me wherever I went. I'm the manager at a department store in the heart of the city, and lately, things have been getting strange. It all started a few days ago when I noticed that the security cameras weren't working properly. There were blind spots throughout the store, areas where the cameras should have been but weren't. At first, I thought it was just a glitch in the system, nothing to worry about. But then, things started to get creepy. I would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows flitting through the aisles when no one else was around. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself that I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. It was like someone or something was watching me, studying my every move from the shadows. I tried to fix the security cameras, to figure out what was causing the blind spots, but no matter what I did, I couldn't seem to get them working properly. It was like someone was deliberately sabotaging them, trying to keep me in the dark. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I started receiving strange messages, threats, warnings, cryptic messages that made my blood run cold. Whoever was behind this wasn't just playing games, they were dangerous, and they wanted me to know it. I tried to tell the police, to get help before it was too late, but without any evidence or concrete threats, there was little they could do. They promised to keep an eye on things, but I could tell that they didn't take me seriously. I felt like I was going crazy, like I was constantly being watched, even when I was alone. Every noise made me jump, every shadow sent shivers down my spine. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received a chilling message on my phone, a photo of me, taken from a distance, with the words "I'm always watching" written underneath. I felt my heart sink as I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with fear and uncertainty. Whoever was behind this wasn't just a harmless prankster, they were a predator, stalking their prey with deadly intent. I knew that I needed to take action, to protect myself before it was too late. So, with a newfound sense of determination, I decided to confront my stalker head-on. I set up a meeting with them, pretending to be interested in their messages, hoping to catch them off guard and unmask their true identity. It was a risky move, but I knew that I had to do something before they struck again. As I waited for them to arrive, my heart pounded in my chest, and my palms grew sweaty with nerves. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that I had to be ready for anything. And then, just when I was about to give up hope, they walked through the door a man, tall and imposing, with a sinister glint in his eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that my stalker was someone I knew, someone I trusted. I confronted him, demanding to know why he had been sending me messages, why he had been stalking me like some kind of twisted predator. But instead of answering, he just laughed, a cold, heartless sound that sent shivers down my spine. And then, without warning, he lunged at me, his hands closing around my throat with a strength that took my breath away. I struggled against him, fighting for my life as he tried to choke the life out of me. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I glanced up and saw a group of people rushing towards us, their faces determined and their expressions grim. They pulled him off of me, dragging him away, kicking and screaming as I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I realized that I was safe, that help had finally arrived. I work at a clothing store in the mall, and tonight's my closing shift. It's always a bit eerie being here after hours, with the dim lights and the empty corridors stretching out in every direction. But I've never been scared before, not like I am tonight. I'm busy tidying up the racks and folding clothes when I hear it, the sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. At first, I think it's just my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I hear it again, louder this time, closer. I freeze, my heart pounding in my chest as I strain to listen for any more sounds. But all I can hear is the eerie silence of the empty mall, broken only by the distant echo of footsteps growing steadily closer. I tell myself that it's probably just another employee finishing up their shift, but something about the footsteps feels off, wrong somehow. They sound too deliberate, too purposeful, like whoever is making them has a specific destination in mind. I try to brush off the feeling of unease that gnaws at the pit of my stomach as I continue my work, but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. I glance around nervously, my eyes darting to every shadowy corner and darkened doorway, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in the darkness. As I make my way towards the exit, the footsteps grow louder, closer, until they're practically right behind me. I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I quicken my pace, my heart racing with fear and uncertainty. I reach the door and fumble with the keys, my hands trembling as I try to unlock it. But just as I manage to get it open, I hear a voice, a low, guttural whisper that sends shivers down my spine. I whirl around, my eyes widening in terror as I come face to face with a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. Their face is obscured by the dim light, but I can see the glint of malevolence in their eyes as they take a step towards me. I stumble backwards, my heart pounding in my chest as I try to put some distance between myself and the figure. But no matter how fast I run, they're always right behind me, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors like a death knell. I can feel my breath coming in ragged gasps as I race through the maze-like corridors of the mall, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. I know that I need to find help, to escape from this nightmare before it's too late. But no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to shake the feeling that I'm being herded like prey, that the figure is leading me deeper and deeper into their trap with every step I take. I stumble and fall, my knees hitting the hard tile floor with a dull thud as I struggle to catch my breath. I glance around wildly, my eyes searching for any sign of escape, but all I can see is darkness stretching out in every direction. I know that I can't stay here, that I need to keep moving if I want to have any chance of getting out alive. With a surge of adrenaline, I push myself to my feet and start running again, my heart pounding in my chest as I race towards the nearest exit. But just as I reach the door, I feel a hand grab hold of my shoulder, pulling me back with a strength that sends me sprawling to the ground. I look up to see the figure looming over me, their face twisted into a cruel grin as they reach for me with outstretched hands. I scream, the sound echoing through the empty corridors of the mall as I struggle to break free from their grasp. But no matter how hard I fight, I can't seem to shake them off, can't seem to escape from their clutches. With every ounce of strength I have left, I manage to wriggle free from the grip of the figure. Adrenaline courses through my veins as I scramble to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I don't look back as I sprint towards the exit, my breath ragged and my legs burning with exertion. The sound of my own footsteps reverberates through the empty corridors, drowning out all other noise as I push myself to the limit. Finally, I burst through the doors and into the cool night air, gasping for breath as I stumble out onto the street. I glance behind me, half expecting to see the shadowy figure emerging from the darkness, but there's no one there. Relief floods through me as I realize that I've escaped, that I'm safe, at least for now. But as I catch my breath and collect my thoughts, I can't shake the feeling that this ordeal is far from over. I hurry home, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty as I try to make sense of what just happened. I lock the door behind me and collapse onto the couch, my body shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. I know that I need to call the police, to report what happened and make sure that no one else falls victim to the figure lurking in the darkness. But as I reach for the phone, I hesitate, my hand trembling with uncertainty. What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm just imagining things or making it all up? The thought sends a shiver down my spine, but I know that I can't let fear hold me back, not now. With a deep breath, I dial 911 and recount the terrifying encounter to the dispatcher on the other end of the line. They assure me that help is on the way and urge me to stay calm and stay put until they arrive. I try to follow their advice, to calm my racing thoughts and steady my trembling hands as I wait for the police to arrive. But as the minutes tick by, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still in danger, that the figure could return at any moment. Finally, I hear the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder and louder until they're practically right outside my door. I rush to let the police in, my heart pounding in my chest as I lead them inside and recount the terrifying ordeal. They listen intently to my story, their expressions grave as they take notes and ask questions. I can see the concern in their eyes as they assure me that they'll do everything in their power to catch the person responsible and ensure that justice is served. As they search the area for any sign of the figure, I can't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. I know that I'm safe now, that I'm not alone in this nightmare anymore. Around 20 minutes later, he is found and arrested, and the nightmare is over. I work at a clothing store, and I never expected to stumble upon something like this. It's a normal day, just like any other, and I'm going about my usual routine, straightening racks, folding clothes, helping customers find what they need. But then, as I'm tidying up the fitting rooms, I notice something strange, a small camera hidden behind a stack of clothes. At first, I think it must be a mistake, some kind of mix-up with the inventory or the security system. But as I take a closer look, I realize that it's no mistake. This camera has been deliberately placed here, hidden from view, with the sole purpose of capturing customers' private moments without their knowledge or consent. My heart sinks as I realize the gravity of what I've discovered. Someone has been spying on our customers, invading their privacy and violating their trust in the most despicable way possible. I know that I need to do something, to take action and put a stop to this before it goes any further. But as I try to wrap my head around what's happening, I can't shake the feeling of unease that gnaws at the pit of my stomach. Who could have done something like this? And why? The questions swirl around in my mind as I try to piece together the puzzle, but there are no easy answers, no obvious suspects. I decide to take matters into my own hands and confront the store manager about what I've found. They're shocked and appalled by the revelation, and we agreed to launch an investigation to uncover the identity of the perpetrator. But as we delve deeper into the mystery, I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching me, lurking in the shadows and waiting to strike. I start to notice strange things happening, items going missing, strange noises in the store after hours. I try to brush it off as just my imagination running wild, but deep down, I know that something isn't right. And then, one day, I receive a chilling message, a video clip, showing me going about my daily routine in the store, unaware that I'm being watched. I feel sick to my stomach as I watch the footage, realizing that I've become a target myself. Whoever is behind this knows about my investigation, knows that I'm trying to uncover the truth, and they're determined to stop me at any cost. I try to stay vigilant, to keep a close eye on my surroundings and watch for any signs of danger. But the fear gnaws at me, eating away at my sanity as I struggle to make sense of what's happening. And then, one night, as I'm closing up the store, I hear the sound of footsteps echoing in the empty corridors, growing steadily closer with each passing moment. My heart pounds in my chest as I realize that I'm not alone, that someone or something is lurking in the darkness, waiting to strike. I try to stay calm, to convince myself that it's just a trick of the mind, but deep down, I know that it's not. I can feel the presence of something malevolent, something sinister, lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. I hurry to lock up the store and make my way towards the exit, but the footsteps grow louder, closer, until they're practically right behind me. I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I quicken my pace, my heart racing with fear and uncertainty. And then, just as I reach the door, I feel a hand grab hold of my shoulder, pulling me back with a strength that sends me sprawling to the ground. I look up to see a shadowy figure looming over me, their face obscured by the dim light as they reach for me with outstretched hands. I scramble to my feet and race towards the exit, my breath ragged and my heart pounding in my chest. I can hear the figure chasing after me, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors as they close in on me with each passing moment. But just as I reach the door, I feel a searing pain in my side, followed by a wave of darkness that washes over me like a tidal wave. My vision blurs and swims as I struggle to stay conscious, my legs giving out beneath me as I collapse to the ground. And then, everything goes black. As I collapse to the ground, the pain in my side intensifies, threatening to overwhelm me. I can hear the figure closing in, their footsteps growing louder with each passing moment. Desperation floods through me as I realize I'm running out of time. Summoning every ounce of strength left in me, I force myself to push up from the ground and stagger towards the exit. Adrenaline courses through my veins, numbing the pain and fueling my determination to escape. With one final burst of effort, I throw open the door and stumble out into the night, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. I stagger blindly through the darkness, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I try to put as much distance between myself and the store as possible. Behind me, I can hear the figure cursing and shouting, their voice filled with rage and frustration. But I don't dare look back, knowing that if I do, it might be the last thing I ever see. I keep running, my heart pounding in my chest as I race through the empty streets, each step bringing me closer to safety. And then, finally, I see it, the glow of streetlights in the distance, the promise of civilization and safety just beyond reach. With a surge of relief, I push myself to keep going, my legs burning with exertion as I push through the pain and exhaustion. And then, just when I think I can't go on any longer, I see them, the flashing lights of a police car coming to a stop just ahead. I collapse to the ground, my body trembling with exhaustion and relief as the officers rush to my side. They ask me what happened, but all I can do is gasp for breath and point back towards the store, where the figure still lurks in the shadows, their face twisted into a mask of rage and frustration. The officers move in to apprehend the figure, their voices stern and commanding as they order them to surrender. But the figure refuses to go quietly, lashing out with a violence that sends shivers down my spine. I watch in horror as the officers struggle to subdue the figure, their shouts and cries echoing through the night as they fight tooth and nail for control. And then, finally, they manage to overpower them, dragging them away in handcuffs as I watch from the safety of the sidewalk. As the adrenaline fades and the reality of what just happened sinks in, I feel a wave of exhaustion wash over me, threatening to pull me under. But I know that I'm safe now, that I made it out alive, and that's all that matters. I'm shaken and bruised, but I'm alive, and for that, I'm grateful. And as I watch the police car drive away into the night, carrying the figure off to face justice, I realize the nightmare is finally over, and I'm free.